The moment Victoria Hale noticed the nervous way the man across from her folded his hands on the table, she felt something unfamiliar press against her chest, something that felt dangerously close to guilt. The restaurant buzzed quietly around them, the soft clinking of glasses and low conversations filling the bright dining room in downtown Chicago. Outside the tall windows, late afternoon light spilled across the streets. Inside, two people sat across from each other who came from completely different worlds. Victoria was the CEO of a fast-growing tech company worth hundreds of millions. Aaron Brooks was a warehouse supervisor and a single father who had spent the last 7 years just trying to keep his life from falling apart. If you were sitting in that chair, across from someone who had the power to change your entire future, would you speak carefully, or would you speak honestly? Victoria had invited him to dinner after a strange series of events that began 2 weeks earlier. Aaron's application for a management role at her company had landed on her desk after several internal interviews. His resume wasn't impressive by corporate standards. No prestigious degree. No polished corporate background. Just years of warehouse work, steady promotions, and a few short notes from supervisors describing him as dependable and quietly respected. Normally, his application would have been declined automatically. But one sentence in his cover letter had stopped Victoria. He had written that he needed a better job because his daughter deserved a future where she didn't have to worry about electricity getting shut off again. Something about the raw honesty of that line stayed with her longer than she expected. So instead of rejecting him, she did something she almost never did. She asked him to meet her for dinner. Now here he was, sitting stiffly across from her, wearing a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit his shoulders. He looked like a man who had spent years standing in places where people rarely noticed him. Victoria, on the other hand, had built a life where people rarely questioned her. She had grown up believing that success was a simple equation. Work harder than everyone else. Make smart decisions. Cut away distractions. And never let emotions cloud judgment. For years, that belief had made her powerful. But tonight, sitting across from Aaron, she wasn't sure it had made her right. She studied him quietly while the waiter poured water. Aaron's hands were rough, the kind of hands that carried the marks of lifting heavy things every day. There was a tiredness in his face that no amount of sleep could probably erase. Yet there was also something steady about him. Victoria had reviewed thousands of applicants in her career. Most people tried too hard to impress. Aaron looked like someone who had stopped trying to impress anyone a long time ago. As dinner began, Victoria explained that the company needed someone to oversee logistics operations. Someone trustworthy. Someone who understood the reality of warehouse life, but could also learn management responsibilities. Aaron listened carefully, nodding slowly, absorbing every word like it mattered more than anything else in the world. Then, gently, Victoria asked about his daughter. The change in his face was immediate. Something softened in him. He explained that his daughter's name was Sophie. She was 8 years old. Her mother had passed away during a sudden illness when Sophie was barely 1. Since then, life had been a constant balancing act between long work hours, childcare, and the quiet fear of not being enough. Aaron described nights when he came home exhausted, but still sat on the floor helping with homework. Mornings when he woke before sunrise to pack school lunches before heading to work. He spoke about it not with pride, but with quiet responsibility. If you were raising a child alone, carrying both the role of mother and father, would you ever feel like you were doing enough? Victoria listened in silence. For years, she had believed that people who struggled simply hadn't pushed hard enough. That success belonged to those willing to sacrifice comfort. But Aaron's life didn't look like laziness. It looked like survival. Then he shared something that completely shifted the air between them. He explained that when he saw the job posting, he almost didn't apply. He had convinced himself that people like him didn't belong in corporate buildings with glass walls and polished floors. But Sophie had seen the job posting on his laptop, and she had asked him why he wasn't applying. Aaron admitted that he had told her he probably wouldn't get it anyway. His daughter had looked at him with complete certainty and told him something simple. She had said that sometimes trying was the bravest thing a person could do. When Aaron finished telling that story, the table fell into a long quiet. Victoria felt something shift inside her. She had spent years building a company based on numbers, efficiency, and performance metrics. She had always believed that people were resources to be optimized. But Aaron didn't feel like a resource. He felt like a person who had been fighting an invisible battle every day while the world walked past him. Then he shared the one thing that truly changed her mind. Aaron admitted that if he didn't get the job, he would understand. He knew companies had higher standards and better candidates, but he said something that stayed with her long after the words were spoken. He explained that the real reason he came tonight wasn't just for the job. It was to show his daughter that courage sometimes means sitting at a table where you feel like you don't belong. He wanted Sophie to grow up believing that trying mattered more than fear. And if that lesson cost him a little embarrassment, then it was worth it. Victoria looked down at the table, suddenly aware of how quiet the restaurant had become. In that moment, the metrics and interview scores in her mind felt strangely small. Because leadership, she realized, wasn't just about hiring the most impressive person on paper. Sometimes it was about recognizing the quiet strength of someone who had carried more weight than anyone noticed. 3 days later, Aaron received a phone call offering him the management position. Not because he had the most polished resume, but because the company needed someone who understood responsibility the way he did. Months later, employees would quietly say that operations had never run smoother. Aaron worked hard, learned quickly, and treated every worker with the same respect he had always hoped someone would show him. Victoria would occasionally see a small photo frame on his desk, a picture of Sophie holding a school trophy with the biggest smile imaginable. And every time she saw it, she remembered that dinner. The night a single father reminded a CEO what real courage looked like. Before the story ends, take a moment and tell me in the comments. If you were in Victoria's place, would you have made the same decision? Sometimes the strongest people are the ones whose struggles no one ever sees. And sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can quietly change the direction of someone's entire life. If this story touched your heart even a little, please consider liking the video, sharing it with someone who might need this reminder today, leaving your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing for more stories that remind us what truly matters. Red.